Today, we're looking at Robert Oster's Viola. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you are in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib. Use it to write for a day and to take my notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, none of that in the 1.1. The 1.1 is very dull in and of itself. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer some shading, pretty decent shading. When you start looking at what's going on in the word quick, you see a lot of dark areas, a lot of midtones, and a couple very light areas. And look at brown, how it starts nice and dark and works its way lighter to a nice mid and then light tone. Very nice shading going on with the extra fine. 7 seconds to dry. The medium is a slightly darker tone overall. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. Beautiful shading throughout. We see that in the starts light, gets very dark, quick, starts dark, gets light, gets mid, dark again. Beautiful. And 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us that there is color variation, and we did get plenty of color variation with this ink. Tomoe River. Now we have no bleeding, but we do have some ghosting. It's not incredibly bad with this, but there is some ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade, none at all. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and a little bit of shading, just a little bit. Like the K in quick is a bit darker than the rest of the word. The Z touching Y in lazy a bit darker than the rest. And the word the looks slightly darker than the words around it. 13 seconds to dry. Not too bad on Tomoe River. The medium is the same tone that we got with the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, the same, spots of shading that are going on. Not tons, but spots of shading. Like in quick, it starts dark, gets mid, gets darker again. The I, dotting the quick, is certainly darker than the rest of the word. Brown is mid-tone to much lighter throughout. It's very nice, a great dusty tone here. 17 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby shows us no color variation, although we did get some color variation in the writing. Rhodia. Rhodia has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, although it does have some shading. And that's a result of the writing itself comes through as a slightly lighter tone than we got with the 1.1. This allowed us to get where in the word lazy you see nice and dark with light, dark at the top, nice and dark through, but the Y in lazy gets to be a nice lighter tone. The D in dog starts light. The O is much darker, the G gets lighter again. Beautiful when it does that throughout the word. 6 seconds to dry. Now the medium is the same tone that we got with the extra fine. It had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, plenty of good shading, just like we got with the extra fine. Looking at what's going on in the 10, nice dark 1, lighter 0. Seconds, lighter, works its way darker. Brown starts very dark, becomes a nice mid-tone. Very nice shading throughout this writing. Just we get more darker and more lighter in words themselves. Now the scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we do get plenty of color variation. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left, we get this very nice purple that works its way up. We do get some separation between the purple and this really nice turquoise blue across the top. It's a beautiful two colors that are making up this great purple. Now, the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That magenta across the bottom, there's a line that looks just kind of there.
but it doesn't make me feel like there's going to be any real permanence here. Now, it works its way up. We see that same white line separating where the magenta and that turquoise is. Still the same exact colors. It looks really the same except for the line across the bottom. Makes me feel there's going to be no real resistance.
Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it.
Looking at the highlighter, I'm drawn immediately to the lowercase h. That lowercase h makes me worried about the fact of blowing out and becoming unreadable and losing things with notes. Other than that, it did very well. I just worry about any time I see some of the blowouts that happen. Now, water's reactivating and lifting almost all of this ink off the paper. We are starting to see the white of the paper coming through on the lower right side. We do see the dots of the Rhodia dot pad. Makes me feel like water's all you're going to need. However, maybe you need just a little bit more. That pen flush does everything that water does and just a bit more. So it does give you more effect for it. We see more of the white of the paper coming through. I just don't know that we're going to need pen flush to get this out of your pen. Bleach, as would be expected, completely obliterates it off the page. There should be no need to use bleach to get this out of your pen.
I test viscosity or flow with a tilt test that I'll link down below in a description or in a card. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9.
Robert Oster's Viola has a viscosity of 1.55, making it a very wet ink, which is a little surprising considering how it feels when you write and what we see with its dry times.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Robert Oster's Viola has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a fast drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Viola, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted a really nice blue-black, a dark blue-black, to go with it. I chose Birmingham Pen Company's Pennsylvania Railroad Boiler Steam blue-black. The second writing sample is done on Levenger paper, a TWSBI notebook, and a black and red notebook. This is Levenger paper, and we see that we get no bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do get some pretty good shading on this Levenger paper. Now, Levenger paper is very good stuff. I just don't care for the narrow lines. Looking at the 1.1, we get no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade with the stub. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone than we got with the 1.1. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, plenty of very nice shading going on. When you look, the 6 is a nice light tone, especially compared to the word quick. Now, what's happening a lot with this particular shading is it's shading word to word, not in the word. I don't see a lot of shading within the writing where the word starts dark and gets light, or starts light and gets dark. None of that. But words themselves, like quick, is definitely much darker than over, which is darker than 6 or seconds. The extra fine took only 6 seconds to dry. Now, the medium is a noticeably darker tone than the extra fine. It looks slightly darker than the 1.1. The medium had no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading. And that's a result of it just being darker all over. It took 8 seconds to dry. Now, when we look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows us some color variation, and we do see some in the writing. The medium shows us none, and we didn't get any in that color, or in that writing sample. TWSBI notebooks, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, none whatsoever. I'm looking back because I had a note about minor ghosting here. So I'm going to go back and say that there's some minor ghosting, because I was looking at the monitor when I said that, but when I'm looking at the paper, I do see some minor ghosting, but I had that in my notes about this before, that I had minor ghosting. Doesn't stop you from using the back of the page. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it does offer some shading throughout. Now the word over is noticeably lighter than the word the, which is darker than the word lazy. So again, we're getting that it shades, but as a word to word, not within the writing itself. It took only 7 seconds to dry. Medium is a noticeably darker tone than the extra fine and darker than the 1.1. It had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading at all here, not with the medium. Enough ink is going down that we're losing the shade, and it's just drying as a nice monotone, but it's a very nice dusty purple. The scrubby of the extra fine shows us color variation, which we did get, and the scrubby of the medium shows us none, and we got none. Black and red notebooks. Now this is not a bleed through spot, this is transfer from a page underneath, but we have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, none. It's rather dull, but this paper doesn't bring out shading in ink. The extra fine is a noticeably noticeably lighter tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer some shading within the writing. Like when we look at the word quick, it's really light, and then it gets to a nice mid-tone at the K. The starts light and gets darker and gets light again. So we get nice shading in the writing with the extra fine. 8 seconds to dry. The medium is a noticeably darker tone than the extra fine and the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it does show us the shading. When we look at the word dog, it starts as a mid, it gets nice and dark in the middle, mid-tone again on the end. Over starts as a nice mid-tone, works its way lighter as you write into it. It gets very nice. Brown starts dark, works its way light. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine and the medium shows plenty of color variation, and we did get plenty of color variation in the writing sample.
So what do I think of Robert Oster's Viola? This is a nice dusty purple. The only thing I can say negative about it really is it did feel a bit dry writing in my pens. As far as the pen you can choose to best get your experience from this ink, I think a broad dry pen or a broad stub is really going to help bring out everything that this ink has to offer. But if you use too wet a pen, you're going to lose the real character that this ink has. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.